Yes.
We'll talk about goals.
Thank you, Mayor Ed Wood, appreciate it very much. Oh, God, we don't have a microphone, I don't think we need one. So here we go. What I wanted to do is first of all give you, start at the top and then we'll get it down to the district level. Jennifer Jones, as you know, will be our district our international president, July 1, the first female to serve in that capacity in the history of Rotary.
And she's a powerhouse too.
Absolutely, yeah. It's tough to keep up with her, I'll get to that. So what I wanted to do is, here's the slide. These are just a few of the things that she has put on her agenda for 22-23. The diversity, equity, inclusion. You know, we're going to have a speaker in the next breakout session as well as at the luncheon. A local expert and certified in this area, so you'll get a lot of good information there. We are going to move in the direction of actually having a diversity, equity, and inclusion district committee, and to get that in place, and it will be a permanent fixture to our district. Empowering girls was an initiative started in this Rotary year, which transcends into empowering women. And that initiative will continue. She wants it to continue. It should continue simply because of the fact you need continuity, you need time-tested results so that if you need to make changes to that initiative, we can do that to make it more efficient and more productive. Also, Jennifer is looking to, her goal there is 30% female members. That's the Rotary International Board target. Many Rotaract clubs are over 50%, so we're headed in the right direction there. Rotarians under 40, that's a big one. How can Rotary continue unless current Rotarians can leave a legacy to future Rotarians? So that's our mission. All Rotarians, as we speak in this time frame in our years in Rotary, it's a leave a legacy. Partnership with community organizations, collaboration, this is a really big theme. When you collaborate and bring in other entities into your service projects and into your goals and objectives, you're going to what? You're going to expand your circle. You're going to create a bigger footprint for Rotary in your community, and you're going to leave fingerprints all over your committee in more places than ever before. And these are mine, bringing it down to the district goals. Impact, raising Rotary's profile in the world. We talk about our 7 areas of focus. I like to use the term our 7 areas of fingerprints, because if you took every one of those areas of focus and had a project in them and found that project, let's say in your community as your starting point, think about all the touch points in your community that you'll be placing by pursuing those projects. Okay, each one bring one. That's our membership initiative, like Empowering Girls. That will be a continuation into this next year. We will be establishing new and innovative clubs. 2 per district is going to be our goal. Here's a thought, just one thing to keep in mind. Be as creative and innovative as you want to be. We had a situation, just to give an example, there was a Rotary club in Camden, Maine, and that club continued to make peace initiatives that play a bigger and bigger role in the mission of their club. And it got to a point where that club's board decided to change the name of the club to the Camden Peace Rotary Club. So think of things like that. Another idea would be, let's say you have a peace committee in your club. And this is what I've been encouraging in my club, and that is because they are doing more and more things in the community and pulling in more members within our own club. I'm encouraging our committee chair to think in terms of creating a new cause-based club off of that committee. So think, that's the way, Rotary is going to evolve, is through creative, trying different things and not ruling anything out until you've had a thorough talk through and tried something and realized that it can be viable. Meaningful responsibility, this is one thing that Jennifer Jones talks about. She talks about interest interviews. Think of sitting down and setting up a schedule with every person in your club. Maybe you, someone else on the board, and then bring someone else in as you go through this process. So everybody on the board can serve in this capacity, but sit down with every member. I don't care if they've been a charter member of the club and they're still there. Sit down with them because everyone is always in a different area and phase of their life. Nothing changes, everything is evolving, and it starts with the individual. So have an interest interview to find out what do they want out of Rotary now? What are their expectations at this point in their life? Because maybe what they want now is 180 degrees from where they were just 5 years ago. You can't make any assumption about anything. This is an extremely a data-intensive process, but it is a perfect way to do your retention. Engagement and retention and interest interviews, they all are the same color. So think in those terms, but Jennifer Jones uses the terms meaningful responsibility. There was a Rotaractor, and he was asked once, and he said, well, what we've learned is when you start working with children, things, if you have your own children, and it's how do you create responsible adults? You give children responsibilities, and that's how they grow into responsible adults. We can always do so much more. That's a given. And then the other thing is the culture of innovation, always be adapting. ABE is my theme for the district, which is always be evolving. Everything is evolving. I don't care what it is. I give you the perfect example of that in the famous architect Frank Lloyd Wright, who lived to be 92 years old. He was an architect from 1887 when he went to work for Louis Sullivan in Chicago until his death in 1959. And do you know what? The last decade of those 92 years were his most productive. And every single year, he tried something different. He was always evolving. And Rotary has got to be there. So that's it. Thank you. Who's next?
You want to do the
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Everybody pretty well, I think, probably knows me. I'm District Secretary Chris Widener. I've got a couple just goofy things to start into the meat of the session. We talk a lot, and for those of you who've heard me say it before, the word communication is critical to me. I'm sure everybody is tired of me saying that word, but that's kind of, I always see that as my role at the district. Just by a show of hands, how many in the room are able to successfully log into Club Runner? That's great. How about My Rotary? How many of you have logged into either in the last month? That's awesome. Okay. One of the things that we'll be going over a little bit later, there's different information that has to be updated annually, and even more often when it comes to membership and some of the more critical things. And so logging into the systems that we use, I know the data systems that we work with are not exactly the most efficient things in the world, but it's what we've got to work with, unfortunately. So even if sometimes we'd prefer to use a can opener and a pair of pliers, it's what it is. So, Jim?
Yes. I'm Jim Kress. I'm the newest guy on the team. You may think I have allergies. I don't. I had sinus surgery this week and I should be home in bed, I have found out. Don't take a trip right after you've had it on Tuesday afternoon to go to a district meeting. But here we are. And so I start with this slide, we're going to talk about the treasurer and the secretary. How many of you are secretaries in here? How many of you are treasurers? How many of you are secretaries and treasurers? No, okay, that's good. It's easy to find. We go to My Rotary, sign in. Most of you have been on My Rotary and recently. You start learning and reference, which is right at the top of the screen. And then we go to club leadership and look up secretary basics. And here are some of the basics to be a secretary. You take role, we have online tools, reporting club info and data, download guidelines to report, use club manager system, manage club online, membership, and that's only your first day. And so here is where it's kind of yellowed out up there is where you sign in, as you know. Then you go to learning and reference, which is right in the middle, and it's yellow. And this one yellow over here is the learning center. Once you go to the learning center, you'll have not only these, but many more areas that you can choose from. Right over here in yellow is club secretary. You click on club secretary, and here are some of them that I just mentioned previously that will be on the screen. And they will tell you how long they should be to read. This is a duration of 15, This is a duration of 15 minutes and 15 and 30. Some of them are 2 hours. So just get your favorite beverage and sit down and enjoy. And then if you decide to leave the course for a while, you can come back and you can resume this course and go right back into it from the place that you were. At the end, you'll be finished, and it will probably give you a certificate. You can either print the certificate, leave it online, or just ignore it. Because I'm saying you'll be using so many of these, you'll have a whole desk full of certificates, which is fine if you want them. Put them on your wall. If you need new wallpaper, there you go. Here's Club Treasurer's Basics. Again, I'm taking them from that first page. Responsibilities and online tools, club and district financial obligations, payments and contributions, protect personal data, reduce risk and use insurance. You don't have to write all these down because they're going to be right here. You go to the center, it says Club Treasurer Basics. And again, there's going to be a long list of things that you could read. And it'll tell you about how long each one will be. And when you've completed them, I completed these a while back, so it doesn't show much. But anyway, this will be blue over here, and you can get back into it, but it's not going to count it again, and so you've read it twice. You've just read it once. Membership, leadership information, that is Chris again.
Okay. As I said before, and as Jim led into, as club officers, the most important thing we can do is really enable communication. Part of that is making sure that all the information is in the right places. That way, everything gets transferred back and forth. When you're dealing with 2,000 plus Rotarians, trying to find somebody's phone number, trying to find somebody's email address, it is enough to drive a person batty some days. As District Governor-elect Tim has found out, sometimes finding a phone number will drive you craziest of all, because sometimes a phone call is just easier. And you are always welcome to call me, speaking of which. When we're talking about the syncing of the data systems between Club Runner at the club level, Club Runner at the district level, and My Rotary, it's supposed to work automatically. I'm not a big fan of the word if or supposed to. It's just not a great way to be. So what we have recommended in the past is to always go to the club instance of Club Runner first, the district instance of Club Runner second if your club doesn't have an instance, and finally to go to myrotary.org to put in the information. Unfortunately, in the last 3 or 4 years, that has changed. We still do recommend, if you have a club instance of Club Runner, that you put in the data there, because that will mostly successfully transfer everything. There is a Club Runner sync function that you have to go into and check, but it does work the vast majority of the time. There are some weird glitches, and that's why you have to go in and check the sync results. But if your club does not have a club instance of Club Runner, the recommendation is now to go to myrotary.org to update everything. That way it will sync back to the district that way. There's been some changes in the way Club Runner self-processes data, and I think that's led to some confusion. So I just want to make sure and emphasize that to everyone, because as we're working on different things, as we're sending out information such as the conference itself, different initiatives from RI that we get that we want to pass along, different district initiatives, such as what many of you had heard yesterday with the new points matching for the next 2 weeks that was generously set up here as part of overall Memorial Day. You know, those communications, getting them out to in a timely manner to the Rotarians so they can take advantage of it and be accurate is kind of the most important thing that I deal with and that many of you will deal with. I will freely admit that one of the things as we get into the end of the year and the end of the 6 months that causes the most confusion is having wrong email addresses. Because all that information from RI automatically gets sent out, and then when I process it and send out the district stuff, if the emails are wrong and somebody's changed a job, somebody's retired, somebody's moved, Lord knows that if you're moving from one part of the state to the other, if you've got a Comcast email address over here, you won't when you moved over to Roadrunner territory or NITCO or CenturyLink or any of the others. So it gets to be a challenge. Do we have any questions or any specific concerns I can try and address? I know a lot of you in the room, but not everybody. So if you do have any questions, I'd love to answer them. And my contact information is right on the front page of the Rotary 6540 site, both my email address and phone number. And as many of you in the room know, I will answer the phone at about any time of day or night. But eat me too early in the morning, and I'll be a little drunk.
So you have instructions on how to sync this over?
Yeah, if you go to the Rotary District6540.org site, under district files, you'll find our YouTube channel. And there's a lot of good videos on the YouTube channel. I'm pretty sure we've got a sync one on there. If not exactly current, it should be close enough to get you by. One of the things that is really challenging, and District Trainer Ed has been great about it, is we do these videos, we do different things, and about every 6 to 8 months, Club Runner will update something, or Rotary International will change something, and then we've got to kind of redo all that. But we keep a pretty close eye on it, and one of the things you can do is on Club Runner itself, Club Runner has learning tools built into it. They'll walk you through everything, both videos and just step-by-step instructions.
Okay.
If you go to the top of the district page, it will say district files, there'll be a drop-down arrow. Click that on, and then you'll see the YouTube.
And there's also the district files link underneath there, which has the manuals for different things. RI has tried to go away from having a lot of print stuff. Almost everything's a PDF at this point.
Chris, worth commenting on how to access information about foundation giving and the reports that are available there.
There is, and thank you, Lee. There is of note very little of the foundation information through Club Runner. You almost have to access everything to do with giving on Rotary.org. Reports, individual giving totals, club giving totals. A lot of the membership information is on Club Runner, but unfortunately there's a lot of the goals, the foundation stuff, that all has to be done in Rotary.org. There's no way to do it in Club Runner.
So part of that reasoning is Club Runner is a third-party program. So that's part, Rotary will only allow so much information that way.
Well, and Club Runner only accesses Rotary International information, not Rotary Foundation, which is a separate entity.
Right.
And that's where it gets kind of interesting, is we're actually dealing with two separate entities. And, yeah, it can be a little confusing. In fact, when we start talking about the invoicing, the programs, and tax and business filings, that's where a lot of people tend to have stumbles.
I think Jane had a question. Jane?
I
Yes.
did. An issue I ran into this week, entering in officers and committee chairs for next year. We have co-chairs for the foundation, but it looks like I can only enter one name. But they both want to be able to access the foundation reports.
And that's where Rotary International there's gonna be a headache. You can enter one in as the foundation chair and one in as programs chair, but it won't give them the same access levels.
I know.
And unfortunately, there's not really a great way to do that. The best thing I could suggest would be to reach out to me or to reach out to data@rotary.org, and we may be able to work out something.
Yeah, I
But-
told them to call RI.
Well,
Hand it
and
off.
yeah, reaching out to data systems, unfortunately, Rotary is very stratified when it comes to the officers. So you can have one person have multiple officer positions, having multiple people in one officer position, they just don't allow for it. There's certain idiosyncrasies that we deal with at the district and the club level that RI just doesn't account for.
Okay,
So, sorry.
they'll have to live with it.
Well, like I said, you can give them access to most of it through a program chair position, but catch me afterwards and I'll try and get you some more
Okay,
information.
thanks.
No problem. The invoices come out twice yearly. I think everybody's well aware of that. The goal is January 1st and July 1st. Unfortunately, that is contingent about RI doing their processing. As long as I've been district secretary, they've never actually had it done on the 1st. More like the 31st or the 30th. We don't generate our invoices until they generate their numbers because we go off of the actual member counts that Rotary gives us. Which is why you always see those emails in December and in June from me, from RI, reminding everybody, double check your membership roster, make sure it's accurate. Once they process it, I have known them a grand total of once in the last decade of dealing with it in different functions to ever have them change it. And we had to go through and show months of an email chain trying to fix a problem. And they just didn't. But they were aware of it, so they did actually make that one right. But it's the only time I've ever seen them do it. They don't like changing the numbers once they've got them. Because that feeds so many other things. That feeds the membership totals that we talk about when we talk about membership. That feeds the foundation numbers for how hours break down and everything else. And yeah, if they have to change those numbers, they get testy. And then the tax and entity filings. You got that? 2 questions?
No, go to the invoices now.
Oh, okay, sorry.
There's a slide for that, yep.
Yeah. Sorry, I was, got me a little confused for a second. RI dues, the Council on Legislation had voted to increase the dues by 50 cents a member. That's been an increase that we've dealt with for the last couple of years. The general liability insurance that you see up there and the directors and officers insurance are estimates based on what we had from last year. We won't know those numbers until we actually see the invoicing this year. It is biannual billing, so it breaks down into half and half. The Rotary magazine, they did make a change, and I want everybody to be aware of it because it's kind of a different change for Rotary. Number one, it's no longer called the Rotarian magazine, a little bit of an odd change. It's just Rotary. And they also do allow you to go in to the membership and adjust whether the person wants to receive it in paper or electronic. There's a lot of people that don't realize that they made that change, and that if people would rather have it electronically, they're perfectly happy to do that. Personally, I'm an iPad guy, as everybody's seen. I mean, half the conference this year has been running on them. So, but some people do prefer it electronically just so they can blow up the text and it's a little easier to read. But it is a change. And then yesterday at the annual business meeting, a dues increase was approved for the first time in 10 years? 12, 13 years. Okay. Pretty much everything else is pretty well in line with what we've seen in previous years. The pets fees did change. Great Lakes has been doing some different things back and forth, but that's just the general trend for anything like that. I think this is a slight increase over what we had Al's year, which was the last true in-person one. We had some difficulties, of course, during Governor John's year up there at Kalamazoo when we got sent home, and then doing it virtually, that changed everything. So the big thing is just remembering that you will get a lot of notices about getting the membership updated when we get to that point, because as much as Rotary is about serving the community and, you know, saving children and everything else, we still run on numbers at a certain level. This is that level, unfortunately. So. And Steve?
I don't have any slides. I'm going to be brief. Rotary International does have an insurance program, general liability. If you know anything about general liability, there has to be a specific claim of either bodily injury or property damage for it to be involved. And then there's also directors and officers coverage. So decisions made at the board level are covered under those policies. It's really pretty broad. And if you walked into Notre Dame, you'd find that they have similar types of policies for claims. Usually most of your claims would probably come out of fundraisers or different type of events that you would be holding. And Rotary has a pretty comprehensive policy. One thing, we always need to be careful about the things we decide to do. And because Rotary does self-insure the first $250,000 of every claim. So we pay for that out of our dues, and they always have several every year where they have to pay that $250,000. So I mean that goes into the cost of insurance, and so it's our responsibility to try and help make sure we're making wise decisions, and also to I always say it's always good to make sure that you have good camaraderie on your board, so you don't end up with lawsuits between your officers and that for the directors and officers coverage. Now, many of you hold events every year, and the city, the school corporation, the place where you're having the event wants a certificate of insurance showing that we have coverage for that. And so we do have certificates of insurance. Every year, Rotary sends out an information sheet to every club. And on that information sheet, it always tells you where you can go and get those certificates. If you don't know how to do it, you don't want to do it, that's what I'm available for. You can send me a request. And I just did one for Jim and did one for the Munster Club just recently. So it's not uncommon to get a lot of those kind of requests for providing certificates of insurance. And they're really pretty simple. They don't cost anything. But if you decided for your club that you wanted to go out and buy your own insurance, you thought Rotary's was too expensive, I'll tell you, it would be a mistake to do that. You would not be able to buy it for the kind of money that Rotary charges us to do that. So the insurance program is very comprehensive, and it does cover quite a bit. And if you ever have any questions about that, or if you ever want me to come to your club and talk to your club about the insurance program, I'd be happy to do that. And the cost is, like I said, it's very, very reasonable for the both the general liability and the directors and officers coverage. So I'm just going to take that couple minutes to say if you need more information, I'm usually listed in the directory for information, so don't hesitate to contact me, and I will get back with you and provide whatever it is you need.
I don't want to steal your thunder. Can you just give a couple words on InCheck, our responsibility with InCheck for youth programs? You got that? Okay. All right.
Thank you.
One of the things, as Tim was just mentioning, we do have fairly few programs that are separate from the dues we already charge. Pets is covered under what we charge. For the clubs that choose to participate in other things such as RILA or youth exchange or other things, there are some fees for that. One of the big expenses to it is we do have a youth protection policy in the district, and each of the clubs, if they have Rotary members transporting kids, has to run through InCheck. They have to run a background check. I mean, it's one of those things where, you could have a member that's been a great person for 40 or 50 years, and you still have to do it because you may not know that he's got a few DUIs on his record. I mean, we don't want to think about that from the standpoint of we won't always want to think the best of any of the Rotarians, but it is really a CYA thing. It's a good thing to know just from the standpoint of it's the right thing to do. And you never know. I mean, unfortunately, if somebody looked up my driving record, they'd see a bunch of seatbelt violations, but that's from owning a vehicle with no seatbelt, so I have at least an excuse. Classic Chevys didn't come with those back in the 60s and 70s all the time. But yeah, that is a separate expense, so that's one of the things as you're looking at your budgets for next year. It's not a big expense, but those little things that we don't plan for tend to bite us, and that's the thing we have to watch out for.
Chris, where do you find that at?
On the district website, under the youth programs, there's actually a form for any of the clubs to get an account set up that don't already have an account set up. And I think the vast majority of the clubs do at this point. So it's just a matter of changing the contact person for the in-check form. And then there's a certain form that has to be filled out via their web portal to do that background check for driving the kids. So.
Is that a separate background check from, like, I'm a basketball coach, I had a background check for that?
That is basically a matter of club policy. Normally, those kinds of background checks are the same. The one caveat I will say is, for instance, the Boy Scout background check doesn't do a driving record. So if they're transporting kids, I would still suggest doing it through in-check just as that layer of protection. That way you know if there's any problems that need to be addressed, or, oh, well, we shouldn't have John drive them, we'll have Dan or something drive them. We have, I always refer back to the same story because in my home club, we had a doctor who was very well thought of, great guy. He was going to drive them, and that was great until we saw that he had 3 DUIs on his record. They were from 30 years ago, but it was still one of those things where we had to sit down and have that conversation of, okay, is this something we need to worry about from a liability exposure, or it's 30 years ago and it doesn't matter anymore? I mean, it's one of those things where you really have to look at it. And it's a judgment call. There's a lot of life that's judgment calls though. So, yes?
I mean, just to clarify, it's a best practice to have anybody who's dealing with Rotary Youth Exchange kids, right, or inbound or outbound kids, taking them
only
lunch, driving them here, there, everywhere.
Right. The only caveat I will say is if they do have a background check within the year for the exact same thing, a duplicate cost, to me personally doesn't make a lot of sense. We do have one of the volunteers that I know of in my home club, for instance, does drive for the Boy Scouts, and he has a driving check done on him every year because of dealing with the Boy Scout camp and everything. So with him, we just request a copy and we don't worry about it. So, any other questions?
Chris, what does that typically cost?
If I recall correctly, the full check, Keith, do you happen to remember?
Oh, $22.
It was less. It was definitely less than 30, and I was thinking it was right around 20. So that because there are a couple different tiers, but the background check with the driving record is a little more expensive. So
Well worth the money.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that is for every person that would be driving. So you don't want to just do one thinking you've got it covered, and then, you know, if you've got 2 people that are signed with one as a backup, just in case something happens, it is the best practice to go ahead and do both.
And it should be done annually, correct?
Should be done annually, yes.
My question, it's a little late for it now, but were they expected to carry that with them when they drove the kids?
No, in general, that's just something that would be on file with the clubs. Because it comes down to a liability insurance exposure.
Yeah, I just wasn't.
Yeah, so
They carried it with them.
When you start getting into youth transport, there are a variety of best practices, but that's not on the list that I've seen. It's just one of those things where it's a comfort level of the kids, comfort level of the driver, and what the liability exposure comes down to. So. Any other questions, or I think that's the major programming expenses. So. You're up to the fun stuff.
I do want to just touch base on one thing. We talked about RILA fees and so forth. World Affairs is going to be starting back up. Valpo just had one. But one of the things as a district that we've really pushed is to make sure that the people that are planning the World Affairs reach out to the clubs first, to make sure that the club is willing to pay the expense for the high school or high schools to attend, because that has been a problem for us in the last couple of World Affairs conferences. At the end, we get all said and done, and there's clubs say, we never approved for the high school to go. And somebody reached out to the high school direct, and they've always participated, and so we're really making sure that the clubs are on board, because otherwise we don't collect those fees and it becomes the expense of the district that we can't recoup. Because the World Affairs Conference, RILA, all of those things are basically set up to break even things. We're not trying to make money. That's why when you look at the budget, it's so many dollars in, so many dollars out, no actual impact on the budget. So I want to talk just quickly about entity filings. There's really three things that each club should have. The first is that they should be registered with the Secretary of State's office. And there's a biannual filing. It's about 20 bucks. You do pay credit card, you pay a little bit more, but it's every 2 years. And you should have that. And I've run a list from Indiana for everything that says Rotary. And it's interesting, some clubs are up to date, some have not actually filed recently, and we've had clubs that have been administratively dissolved over time because they didn't do it. There's no automatic that the Secretary of State says you didn't do it. So it's up to the club, and that's just Indiana Secretary of State, and they have a brand new portal. It's very easy.
I treasurer for our condo association. They remind me. Mine is due in July, so I don't know why they don't do Rotary.
Well, I think what happens is there's a person's name on it, and there's a person's email address, and that has changed. And I mean, that's what Chris talks about. When there's a change, we can only go by what we get. And so when we send out invoices, inadvertently, every time there's 2 or 3 invoices bounce back because the email that's on file, or we've had situations where the person's been gone from the club and they've just never changed it. And we don't know that. And so, you know, we have outstanding invoices from 6 months, or the next billing cycle comes, and it's kind of funny because sometimes the next bill gets paid and the prior one wasn't paid because, you know, the treasurer didn't in their mind say, why don't I have an invoice? I mean, that's the thing that we kind of, okay, the invoices come twice a year from RI and they come twice a year from the district. And if you don't get one, the question should be asked because Chris has done the work. So the first one is the Secretary of State, and I did run a list, and so it's easy to find. The second is once you've registered with Secretary of State, you should also be registered for the IRS as a not-for-profit organization. Now, there's 2 levels there under the not-for-profit world. If your gross receipts for all fundraisers, everything, is under $60,000 a year, you can file what they call a 990 NP form, which is just this, it's a postcard form. You go in, you click, my receipts are under 60,000, you sign it, you're done. The follow-up to that is that there's an Indiana NP 20 form, and it's basically the same thing. You're tax exempt, but they still expect you to file that return because you are an entity in the state of Indiana. So there's really just the 3 filings that each club should be keeping up with, and none of them are cumbersome. Now, clubs that have more than 60,000, obviously the 990 is a required form, and they're not fun, and you're gonna have to find an accountant probably to do it just to get it done. And so the district would file one, but most clubs still all operate under the RI charter. So when they ask for certain information, you can use the RI information as your information for your clubs. So it's really just 3 filings: Indiana Secretary of State, IRS for the NP 990, and the NP 20 for the state of Indiana. So it's really 3. There's not a requirement for Secretary of State, but you really do want to be registered with them so that you show up on other lists and places that show that you exist. And because somebody could come along and ask you for a certificate of existence, And that comes right from the Secretary of State. You just go online, you print it, it shows that you're up to date and you're an existing business in the state of Indiana. And sometimes when you get into fundraising and grants, that's a requirement that you prove that you have a certificate of existence within the state. So, questions?
Most clubs are not a separate corporation, right?
No.
They're not a 501c3 not-for-profit organization.
Most are actually, a 501c3 is a charitable organization. Rotary is not a charitable organization, it's 501c4.
Yeah.
But that's the discussion we've had, where we're creating a 501c3 within the district, because technically we aren't allowed to accept contributions. And so when you have, like they did with, Rensselaer did with Kentucky, you know, people are making contributions and they expect it to be a contribution, and you're supposed to get a document that says, here, you made a charitable contribution. Technically, as a district, we can't do that. And so most everything that we do is sponsorships, and we record it as a sponsorship so that it comes back as a deductible sponsorship expense, not a charitable contribution. But for events like Kentucky and other things, disasters we talked about, we're going to set one up to be prepared that we can accept those in that fashion, and it promotes things that we couldn't do otherwise. So.
And speaking of the Kentucky situation, that was something where we actually partnered with our community foundation for some of that. The problem was, because of what we were trying to do and the speed we were trying to do it, there were certain things that didn't quite work out the way we expected, and we couldn't receive contributions of equipment because there were several businesses that reached out that were trying to donate stuff, but because we weren't a 501c3 and the foundation, the community foundation we were working with had no way to process that correctly, we ended up not getting some of the equipment we could have.
So anyway, those are kind of the things that sometimes get lost in the shuffle of changing secretaries, treasurers. You know, I'm a firm advocate, and most clubs have went to that the treasurer tends to be the same for a period of time, just because of the continuity that you want for treasurers. Secretaries, I would agree, are the same thing, but that's not always true in some clubs. So we love to see continuity of secretaries and treasurers. So.
And the other thing is, at the district level, we still have an open file and an open dialogue to create our own district 501c3 fund account for just for these reasons. So we're moving in that direction.
Okay.
This is information that you need to get out. I want you to think for a moment, when you were a new member, or now, where do you find some information about dates, times, and locations of your club meeting? Where do you find out about the annual theme? Where do you find out about an email update? These can all be updated through Club Runner. You can also update them through RI. My suggestion on something that you want updated, especially emails, is to go back and check your email in a week or so, or a few days, to make sure it was done. Because I've been in a position where my old email was on there and I had changed it. I myself had changed it, but it was not picked up, it wasn't sent through, so you really need to go back and change some of those things. Very easy to do. You can get onto Club Runner, you can get onto RI, you simply go to Club Information, and then you see all of these areas, and you click on what needs to be done. That needs to be done at least annually, because the dates, times, and locations may change annually or as needed. So be sure that you do that as a club leader. Any questions?
Thank you very much, everyone. Tim and Keith and Steve and Chris and all of you for being here. Jim, thank you for your comments and instruction. This concludes our session. I think there is a slide that gives us an opportunity to ask questions that you haven't asked before. I know we're 2 minutes past time, but we have until 11 o'clock for our next session. So are there any other questions that any of us can address? Hearing none. There's the information of Chris